Welcome, welcome. Welcome, everyone. My name is Lauren Woods. I am a proud member of the Soul Collective. I have the honor of welcoming everyone, of extending an invitation and doing some small housekeeping. So I know you could be anywhere, but you decided to come here. We are so happy that you're spending your evening with us to hear stories by Black women for you all. We are Soul Collective, a women of color storytelling group. We are Soul because we are women of the sun. We are Soul because we are sharing our lives. And we are so happy that we have the honor to do that with you this evening. I also want to begin with an invitation. So some of you all have come this evening with stories in your hearts, stories in your mind. If anything compels you this evening and you feel like this is a community I want to be a part of, this is your official invitation. We want you to join us. I also want to share some housekeeping. So if you don't know, the restrooms are on 8 and 10. We want you to use your phone, but we have some instructions on how we help you do that. If there's something that you hear, or there's just like a line and you have to write it down, open up your notes app, text it to a friend. We want you to capture those words. If you need to talk or take a call, we just ask that you step out and come back to join us. If you feel like you have to text or have to send an email, dim your phone so that it's not blinding everyone when you're doing that. And if you take video or picture, please tag us. We gave everyone a card as you were entering. You should have received a card from Soul and some seeds. Please use any of those hashtags to connect with us online, to tag us in your post. We require and we lean on our community to spread the word. All of this is volunteer ran. We do this because these stories live in us and we want to share them with you. So please this evening enjoy Stories from Soul. This evening I am planting pearls of wisdom. Hello everybody, how are we doing? All right, great. I am so excited to have all these super special people in the room. It is an honor to have all of you here. I'm going to speak to you wearing two different hats. As Senior Director of Programming and Engagement here at the Logan Center, I'd like to welcome you to the Logan Center and say thank you for coming to the South Side if you aren't from the South Side. And if you're from the South Side, thank you for coming up here to the Penthouse. We're glad to have you. So at the Logan Center, we have been busily celebrating our 10th anniversary, and now we're getting ready for a hot summer full of wonderful activity. There will be music, there will be some amazing exhibitions, there will be some camps for young people, and they'll be showing what they do. We're going to have some workshops on Tuesdays in July. There'll be Double Dutch. On Thursdays, there'll be mural making with Dorian Sylvain. There are going to be lots and lots of things, so please look out to come back to the Logan Center. And on behalf of Soul, where I serve as Artistic Director, I want to tell you that the artistic process that we go through is that we have a group of women. It shifts sometimes who's involved. Shout out Gay, who has been a member of Soul, and Kelly, who has been a member of Soul. They're not coming with us this time, but maybe next time. And Ruby is also here, right in the front row. So it's a place where we shift and come and go. And we come together and we meet on Zoom. Some people have been telling stories for a long time. Some people are just getting started. When we meet, we pick a theme. And so the theme for this cycle was seasons, and the broad definition of seasons in our lives. And so every week I brought different prompts to try to get people to think of different perspectives on the seasons. And we came up with some stories. Some of us were interested in folktales, and some of us were interested in personal stories. In the first half of the show, you're going to hear this theme, I'm planting, because we're talking about things that we're planting and harvesting. You're going to hear a series of short stories, and then we're going to take a break. We're going to hear our featured special guest for tonight, Willa Taylor. And then we're going to continue with our stories about seasons in our lives. I want to say that stories are important. I want to say that there are all different ways of telling stories. Sometimes we have film, and sometimes we have poetry, and sometimes we have dancing, and sometimes we have music.
Tonight we have people standing and telling stories that come from their heart, and I thank you for being here and ask your heart to be open to receive what might be shared in this space. And I am going to turn it over to begin the I Am Planting section of the evening with our first storyteller, Keela Moore.
I am planting self-care. Long ago, thunder and lightning lived on the earth among the people. Thunder was a sheep, and lightning was her daughter, a lamb. And everyone lived happily until the first time lightning had her tantrum. Now this tantrum was a little bit over the top, let's say. She stamped her feet, she kicked doors, and her mother couldn't console her. But she was stronger than she appeared as a little lamb. And so when she stamped her hooves, she started some flames and started a fire. And so the people went to the king and said, "King, lightning can't stay here with us. She's going to have another tantrum and do even more damage. She must go far away." And so the king sent his messengers to talk to Thunder. He said, "Thunder, you must go far away from all the people so that lightning's temper tantrums don't do any more damage here." And so Thunder took her daughter, went across the countryside, crossed through the forests, and up in the high mountains, away from everyone. They built a new life there, and everything was great. Then lightning had another temper tantrum. This one was even bigger because she was a little bit bigger. And she raced across the mountainside, stamping her feet and kicking down the trees. And Thunder came after her, calling, "Please, be quiet, calm down, stop." No avail. It was too late. Lightning had sparked a fire, and this fire traveled down the mountain, through the forest, across the countryside, and burned the crops. So the people marched straight to the king and said, "King, it's happened again. Lightning had another temper tantrum. She burned our crops. And what's more, we were kept awake all night by Thunder yelling after her. They have to go. They can't stay here on earth. We need to be safe." And so the king sent his messengers again to talk to Thunder. They went across the countryside, through the forest, up the mountains, and told her she must leave Earth. So Thunder and Lightning said goodbye to the earth, and they went up to the sky, where the people were sure that they would be safe from thunder and lightning. But as you all know, to this day you can still see lightning acting up in the sky. And sometimes she gets so strong with her tantrums that it touches down here on earth, causing fires. And you can hear thunder calling after her to be quiet. May keep you up at night as well. And those times that you'll see lightning in the sky but you don't hear thunder, that's when you know Thunder needed a break. Thunder went on vacation. She took her time for self-care. I was inspired by this folk tale because I have 2 children of my own, one that I planted here today. And when they have tantrums, whew, it's lightning, damage everywhere. And I'm bellowing, saying, "Please stop," like thunder. And I bet you guys can relate if you have children of your own or have babysat a child when they have a tantrum. And so remember to take time for your self-care. Thank you.
I am planting equity and justice. I was standing in a field of 100,000 tulips, and one radical yellow one. And I wasn't in Holland, Michigan. And I wasn't in the Netherlands. It was right here on the south side. Did you guys see those tulips? This is a great audience, by the way. So, as you know, I'll just say for those of y'all that missed the tulips, Amanda Williams, our local MacArthur genius, planted 100,000 tulips. And the purpose of it was to make a statement on redlining on the south side. And I think we all probably know what redlining is, but let me just read to you the sign that she had amongst the tulips. Redlining is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as to refuse a loan or insurance to someone because they live in an area deemed to be a poor financial risk. Deemed to be a poor financial risk. I wanted to see the tulips because I knew they'd be extraordinary, but I also wanted to stand in the tulips because I only lived 5 minutes away and had my own redlining story. See, about, let's say, 7, 10 years ago, we wanted to do some work on our house. Now, we have an 1889 brownstone in Bronzeville, which, always needs work. And we did as much as we could. We bought a new fridge, we bought a new stove, we did a little bit of painting, and then we're like, okay, we want to do more. So we went to the bank, and we met this really nice black man, friendly banker. He sat us down, he looked at our credit history and said, oh, there's so many products you could choose from. You could do this, you could do that, you could do the other. Interest rates are low. All you have to do is go through the appraisal process. So we're like, okay, sure, no problem. So we set the appraisal date on a date that was convenient for us, which meant that we were both home, my husband and I, and both our kids were home. And we waited, and the appraiser rang the bell, and we opened the door, and he barely said hello. Middle-aged, white man with a clipboard and a pen. And we walked him through our entire house, top to bottom. So started on the 3rd floor, home office and family room, walked through all 4 bedrooms on the 2nd floor, half bath, full bathroom, 1st floor, traditional double parlors, original woodwork intact, a 3/4 bath shower, eat-in kitchen, all the things. Now granted, we also had to take him to the basement. It's not pretty down there. But still, I think we did well. A couple of days later, he saw our children finishing their breakfast, looked at them, and he left as quickly as he came, silently, without a word. A couple of days later, we got a call from the banker, who was still very friendly, but not as cheerful. So before we had 5 products to choose from, low interest rates, lots of money, now we had 1 product to choose from. Less money, higher interest rate. You guys heard this story before? Yeah. So of course, he said, never mind. No, thank you. And soon after that, there were more and more studies that came out about redlining still occurring, even though technically it's illegal, right? There was a really popular Trevor Noah monologue that talked about literally just swapping out the family photos, the art, the book, and who opens the door can make a $100,000 difference. And by the way, our difference was $120,000. I looked that up today and I got mad all over again. So, you always think that things are going to get better with justice and equity, but things still remain the same. So I teach down the street at the Harris School of Public Policy, and my students did a study this quarter on racial bias in home appraisals. And they mapped out the whole process, all 8 steps. And each step, there is a point of subjectivity and bias to come in without checks and balances. I also learned that the majority of home appraisers, 97%, are white men, just like the profile of the dude that devalued us. So I already have my revenge planned, right? Whenever we move, I have my white allies lined up. We'll remove all the ethnic art, all of the Black liberation illustration books off the shelves. And I'm gonna buy the frames and leave the white models. And then we'll leave, and we'll have our white allies get the value that we deserve. But until then, I will enjoy Amanda's tulips every spring and continue pushing for equity and justice. Thank you.
I am planting seeds of healing. I grew up in a household filled with music. And my parents went through a really heavy, serious Walter Jackson phase. Now, but I want you to know that when my mother loves a song, she plays it so much we learn to hate it. And one of those songs that she played, and actually we never actually learned to hate this one, because it's actually a really beautiful song, it's Walter Jackson's Everything Must Change. And it's a beautiful song. I've heard it many, many times. I did some research. There are 120 versions of this song. If you don't know about secondhand songs, it's this really cool website where you can find a cover about anything. George Benson sung it. Phil Perry's done it. Oleta Adams has done it. Absolutely beautiful. Peggy Lee, Barbra Streisand, Nina Simone, Stevie Winans, they've all done it. Bernard Iger wrote the song, and he actually has a version on it on Quincy Jones's Body Heat, and if you haven't heard it, please listen to it. Now, as the title suggests, this is a song about the fact that our lives are always in constant change. Everything and everyone must change. The song gives us examples of those changes. Winter turns to spring. Young people, if they're very lucky, grow old. Mysteries unfold, and wounded hearts heal, but never before their time. Now, it also lists 3 constants, 3 exceptions to this rule of change. Rain comes from the clouds, and sunlight's from the sky, and hummingbirds fly. During my most uncertain, most painful times, that song has gotten me through. It's a reminder that the turmoil doesn't last always. The storm will pass. I'm going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Now, I'm of the age that I've had lots of practice with loss and grief. And I can attest that a healing heart is not a time-bound process. The line of the song is, "A wounded heart will heal, but never much too soon." My heart has been cracked and broken many times. It's a really resilient muscle. And I want to share 2 times that my heart was shattered and I wasn't exactly sure that I was going to be able to put it back together. My best friend, Robin Deland Johnson, died in 1994, which was less than a year after my father died. The healing process is unpredictable and uncontrollable, and no matter what you do, or what you plan, or how you think it's going to happen, it doesn't work that way. It works in its own way, in its own time. Just last week, I broke down because something reminded me about my father. It will be 20 years in July. And I couldn't contain it. The wailing sound that came out of my body was very similar to the one that came out when I got the call telling me that Robin had died. Where are you? I got some bad news. I was walking back from my office after lunch when I got that call, and as soon as I hung up, my body shook. And I fell down to the ground on my knees, and a pained wail came out of my mouth, and I screamed. The sidewalk was covered by a concrete building, and so the sound echoed, and everything stopped. White noise rang in my ears, and tears streamed. And after that initial wail, the sobs were silent. I remember choking on those sobs. I could not breathe. I could not think straight. I'd already lost my father, so this was a very familiar feeling. I knew that confusion, that pain, that sadness. The first week after my father died, my brother and I marveled that we had survived. We kept thinking, if we can live through this, we can live through anything. I moved in the world with wonder and surprise that although I felt like my flesh had been ripped from my bones and my muscles and my tendons, I was still standing and still walking. Despite the fact that for one solid week I could not stop coughing, I still had breath. That despite the fact that my first love was gone, I still felt love, deep, profound, unshakable love. That in between the tears that I thought would never stop, I could and I did laugh. And that even though I felt like I was walking, sleepwalking across time and space in a completely different dimension, nothing had actually changed in the time-space continuum. I wanted the world to stop and take notice. Don't you see how much pain I'm in? Don't you see how much pain my family is in? I wanted everything to stop. Stop what you're doing. Just stop. That isn't how this works. The world continues to move forward. People go on with their lives, even the ones that stop and hold us and let us cry and wipe our noses. They eventually go back to their own lives. We're alone at some point in all this process, and in the quiet, when that planning is ended, when we've done all the celebrations of life, when we've answered all the phone calls, all the texts, done the thank you notes, the different work begins. There are fewer distractions then and more memories. There are more moments to miss our loved ones and feel that loss really deeply. Walking through and into our healing is heavier then. Ndumba is a Zulu word that means hut for traditional healing. And this is a place where people go to reveal themselves under the guidance of the elders and the spiritual healers and the ancestors. It's believed that the ancestors are actually living in that place. And in this place, people go to tell their stories about their pain and their trauma, and it's a way that we reverse those things. And it's in this community that the healing begins. And I've been thinking a lot about grief lately and what it would look like in such a place like that. What would it feel like? Without people watching and waiting for us to get better because our pain makes them uncomfortable. Instead, surrounded by people and ancestors that are encouraging us to rail, encouraging us to wail and thrash and shake and scream and cry, and they are participating with us in our healing. Without this artificial timeline for getting over it, without that cultural context of pushing through and moving on, would we heal faster? Would broken hearts fuse better? In the years since I've lost my best friend Robin and my father and so many others, the coughing and the choking and the gasping for breath have stopped. My skin grew back over my muscles and my tendons, and the open wound became a scab. I have come to terms with the fact that I will never fully heal, and I'm not sure there is such a thing. I'm not sure I would want that. I like my brokenness. It makes me more me and reminds me of them. I've incorporated the pain and learned to live with the cracks in my heart. I think of those cracks as markers of how the loss has changed me. I am strong and vulnerable in different ways. Impatient because I understand what is most important and what is not, and I don't want to waste any time on the unimportant. Grateful for the deep love that leads to intense pain and loss. And I have a clarity that I didn't have because I felt that fragility of our lives and that it can change in an instant. So I try to do the only thing I can do. I pay attention, I live in the moment, and I savor them all. Sometimes I sing. Everything must change. Nothing and no one stays the same. Thank you for listening.
I am planting hope. So, Wangari Maathai is one of the people who I look up to. She is an inspiration. If you're not familiar with Wangari Maathai, she was the first African woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And she won that prize for her work in what became known as the Green Belt Movement. In the course of her lifetime, she was responsible for the planting of 30 million trees. Wow. Imagine that. And her planting of trees was revolutionary work. She was teaching women how to plant trees starting in their backyard, and she faced a lot of difficulty, a lot of pushback. And she says that the story that encouraged her when she was feeling most discouraged was the story of the hummingbird, which says that there was a terrible fire in the forest, and all of the big animals were running as quickly as they could to get away from that fire. And then there was a tiny little hummingbird that was flying over the fire and picking up what little water she could carry in her beak and flying back and dropping these little drops of water on the fire, flying and dropping little water and flying and dropping little water, and the big animals are looking up and they're like, "What are you doing?" And she says, "I am doing the best that I can." Wangari Maathai says that is what she would remember when she was feeling most discouraged. She would have in her mind that little hummingbird dropping that little bit of water, and she would say to herself, "I am doing the best that I can." That's a story that I love to tell because of the way that it encourages. And over the years, I've had a variety of very interesting experiences connected to this story. I told this story at a big festival, and I finished, and someone came up to me and said, "I want you to know that they don't have hummingbirds in Kenya." And I was like, okay. And Wangari Maathai could only tell stories about what happened in Kenya. So that was fascinating. And then I had an experience where I told the story last summer at a program for young people, and someone else who was part of that program, who was brought in to be a storyteller, who is Native American, told a hummingbird story. And it was very similar, but not quite the same. And one of the distinctions in that story is that when the hummingbird went to pick up the little bit of water, the other animals were inspired to change. And they went to get water. So that if everyone was going to get water, then so much more change could happen. That really touched me. It made me think about how these stories move and how we hold them and share them. So last weekend, I was at one of my favorite summer festivals. Mole de Mayo is one of my favorite festivals. So out there at Mole de Mayo, and I went twice. So this is at the second time. And I'm walking through and I'm thinking, what is the thing that I might want to take home? And I see this huge, beautiful painting of all these butterflies. And I love butterflies. But it was really big. And I was trying to figure out, like, where would I put it? And then I saw that they had frames this size. And I said, "Do you have one of butterflies this size?" And the artist disappeared for a long time. And he came back and he said, "I don't have the butterflies, but I have this one with the hummingbird." Wow. And I said, "That's the one And I said, "Are you familiar with the story of the hummingbird?" And he said, "No." And I told him the story, and his face lit up. And I carried away his painting, but more than that, I carried away that moment where I was able to say, your art gave me something, and my art gives you something. And hopefully that sharing will continue to pass on and on. So in that moment when you are feeling most discouraged, remember that hummingbird, and do the very best that you can. Thank you. We are going to take a 10-minute intermission now, have some water, meet somebody that you don't know, say hello to the folk that you do know, and we will come back in 10 minutes and hear Willa Taylor. All right, everybody. We're about ready to get started on the second half. Thank you all for being here. We have been talking about, as a storytelling group of women of color, wanting to be able to make space to have people be special guests and come into the circle. And we were all like, what if Willa would come? That would be amazing. So we're just so excited to have Willa Taylor here. For you all who are not familiar with Willa, I'm going to tell you a bunch of the fancy things. She is the Walter Director of Education and Community Engagement at the Goodman Theater. She's created education programs that have been transformative across the country, including at Lincoln Center, New Victory, and Arena Stage. She is the inaugural recipient of the Exemplar Award from the August Wilson Society, and the 2021 recipient of the Association of Theater and Education's Leadership in Community-Based Theater and Civic Engagement. She is a practitioner of the Theater of the Oppressed. She has been published widely. Now I'm going to tell you the stuff from the heart. So, you may not know that years ago, I lived in New York. And I went to New York and worked as Director of Education at Lincoln Center Theater. And the person who had been Director of Education at Lincoln Center Theater right before I came there was Willa Taylor. So I had big shoes to fill, and then I went to New York and Willa came back to Chicago. And then I came back to Chicago. And we had never met each other, not in New York, not in Chicago. We met at a theater conference. And it was like, you're Willa Taylor! So I admire the commitment and dedication that Willa has given to storytelling. She has inspired young people, elders, folks across the city to not only acknowledge that their stories are important, but to have the courage to tell them. And so we're thrilled to have Willa Taylor with us this evening. Thank you.
I hope I can live up to that. First of all, I want to thank Emily and Shelley and the Soul Collective for even inviting me and considering me to come to this. This is such an honor, and it is particularly, I think, touching to me, this idea of planting something, planting hope, planting self-care, things that we really need in the world, and often I am out of in this crazy time that we're living in. But one of the things that I want to talk about tonight, and one of the stories I want to share with you, is about what has been planted in me by the people that I love. I really think those of you who don't think you are storytellers, I would encourage you to think again. Because we all have stories to share. We all have stories to tell. And you never know, that small story that you think means nothing, it was just an incident, just a blip in your life, somebody really needs to hear that story. And they need to hear that story from you. So please, go out into the world and share more stories. Tell your stories. The only thing you need to tell a story is somebody to hear it. And you can always find somebody to hear it. I want to really honor all of the wonderful storytellers who came before me tonight. These wonderful, wonderful stories. It's how we learn about ourselves, it's how we learn about each other, it's how we, I think, can really heal the world by sharing these stories of pain and triumph and trauma and joy. And it's, I think, particularly important for us as Black women as women of color to share these stories, because often the narrative that we hear about us is not the narrative that we create for ourselves. These stories that we heard earlier tonight, all the ghosts of the warriors and the heroes that they conjured, make me think about my life, about the gifts that I have been given, the gifts that I take for granted, and what's been planted in me. I think about the greatest privilege that I've ever had, and that is the people who have loved me, that raised me and taught me, that stood between me and the darkness. I think about my parents, Minnie Nell and Johnny Leroy, public school librarian and a Pullman porter come dining car cook on the railroad. My mother, fiercely righteous and tough as nails, who plucked out spirituals on the piano on weekend mornings and loved to sing, who pulled me into her lap every night and read me a story, filling my world with dreams and stories from Baldwin to Hemingway to Wharton, her favorite authors. She insisted that I never attend the school where she taught. Thank God for that. She wanted me to have the chance to be my own person and to make my own mistakes. As Willa, not as Mrs. Taylor's, the librarian's daughter. And I cannot say how grateful I am for that, because I made a lot of mistakes. I think about my dad, Johnny, a man of immense intellect, but very little formal schooling. He dropped out in 10th grade when his father died, so he could support his mom and his sister. He was a voracious reader, like my mom, but he loved nonfiction and political discourse. He was gone 4 days a week on the Southern Pacific Railroad run from Dallas to Denver, but when he came home on the weekends, he took me with him to the barbershop to hang out with his fellas and kind of show me off. He loved to dance and had absolutely no rhythm. He looked more like Muhammad Ali than he did Chubby Checker when I tried to teach him the twist. He showed me, though, how to treat women and how I should be expected to be treated by the way that he treated the women and the people in his life. He schooled me on Aretha Franklin and Dexter Gordon and Miles Davis and John Coltrane, and he snuck me my first sip of scotch on the back porch of our house, listening to Jackie Robinson hit a home run on the radio. I think about Daddy's sister, my Aunt Benny, who lived in Fort Worth, which was, at that time, it seemed forever away, but it's just a half-an-hour drive, who would always bring me something special from all the places that she traveled. And then she would regale me with those stories about ocean voyages and ancient marketplaces. She and I would trace her journeys on a map that we dotted with pens and with photographs, ensuring that her only niece, one day we'll see these places together. She died too soon for that, for us, for me. I think about my grandfather, my mother's father, Prince Fowler Jackson. He was a barrel-chested, blackety-black black man with a booming bass voice and a penchant for white suits, who only drove Cadillacs and always carried a Bible with a pistol stuck in the Papa, which is what I called him, was an African Methodist Episcopal presiding elder, which is sort of like a gospel district manager, right? And he traveled all over Texas to preach and build churches. He and my grandmother helped build Paul Quinn College, one of the first black colleges in the country for people. You see, I grew up in the segregated South. And a black man driving a Cadillac on the back roads through Jim Crow, Texas, was not for the faint of heart or the unarmed. Even in my all-black enclave of cosmopolitan Dallas, we were all admonished, be in before the street lights come on. because all the adults knew what could happen. Papa, who Nana kept a close eye on, Papa taught me how to fish, he taught me how to hunt, and he taught me how to play checkers. Although he always beat me, much to the chagrin of my mother and my grandmother. "Won't you let that child win the game?" they would admonish. Papa would lean back in that Queen Anne chair in the living room, fix him with a smile as he removed his glasses and pointed to me and pronounced, "Ain't nobody gonna give that child anything. She gonna have to win and fight for everything that she gets. She might as well start learning how to do that on this board." They'd decry, oh, my grandmother, Nana, and Mama would get all upset, and they would decry how unfair it was, how I was just a little girl. All the while, I'd be setting those checkers back up on the board for another match, determined that this time, I was gonna beat him. I finally did when I was 19. But most of all, I think about Nana, my maternal grandmother. Willa Lee Jackson, the woman whose name I carry, was the second youngest of 14 children, the eldest born into slavery. Nana was as fair as Papa was dark. Her complexion and her long silken hair a gift of her Mama Hattie's Cherokee roots. She was polished and refined. She had taught history at Paul Quinn. She and Papa had worked as missionaries, and she was a woman of regal elegance. She was the mother of the church, of course, the honorific accorded to the preacher's wife. But for me, she was Nana, who baked me vanilla muffins whenever I got an A, who sliced boiled eggs and arranged them on top of the spinach to try and help me eat them, who fed me chicken and rice soup and Ritz crackers whenever I was sick, and who taught me everything I know about justice. These people, the aunties and the uncles and the play cousins and the neighbors and teachers that peopled my world, taught me every day, not by word, but by example, that the time is always right to do what's right. They showed me how to live a life of quiet courage and honor. Aunt Harriet, who would get up at 4 a.m. every holiday Sunday and go to care and cook for the white family that she worked for before coming home to care and cook for us. And she did that so that we didn't have to. My Auntie Jewel, who started a newspaper to report the news and the truth of Black lives in a segregated Dallas, where blacks couldn't even rate an obituary in the 2 white newspapers. I think about the privilege of sitting among them in Nana and Papa's living room in 1963 as we watched CBS cover the March on Washington and Dr. King's speech. And sitting together again in that living room in 1969, watching the coverage of the Stonewall riots and feeling a kinship within, for me. In that moment when people rose up and stood up and decided that this was their line in the sand, I recognized Nana and Papa and Jewel, not because they were queer, but because they too had known when it was time to rise up and fight, no matter what the odds were. The time to do right is not just about the heroic moments, when we take to the streets or we stand our ground. It's not only the times when we stand up to bullies, when we shout, "Never again," or "Time's up," or "Black Lives Matter." Those moments matter, yes, they do. But mostly, it's in the everyday struggles. When we stop to talk to the homeless woman that we would usually stride by. When we put down our tech and listen to each other with an open heart. It's when we recognize the humanity in every human, regardless of their circumstance and regardless of where they come from. or what they have to offer, or who they voted for. As I think about King's words and this quote, I also remember one of Nana's favorite prayers, something she taught me a long time ago that I have always tried to live up to. It speaks to the life of Dr. King, but it also, so much, speaks to the many ancestors who sacrificed and built a way for us to be here tonight. Lord, help me live day to day in such a self-forgetful way that even when I kneel to pray, my prayer shall be of others. Help me in the work I do to ever be sincere and true, and know that all I do for you must needs be done for others. Yes, others, Lord. Yes, others. Let this be my motto be. Help me live for others, so that I may live for thee. Thank you.
Taylor. Well, thank you. Thank you for being our first special guest for the Soul Collective. So happy to have you with us. So we're getting ready to start the second half. Before I do, I just wanted to bring attention to the card that the ushers gave you before you started. Many of you gave online and chose to purchase a ticket. Thank you. So we as tellers, this is our passion project, and we put money in collectively to pay for our artistic direction, but we still have tech, we still have rent, we still got expenses, we still got bills, y'all. So if you haven't donated, or if you feel moved to give again, use the QR code on the back here. Also, if you're not following us on social, please do. That's our best way of communicating. We also, with the Eventbrite, will hold on to your email and let you know when our show is coming up in the fall. And this show is being recorded. And so we will have a virtual live screening of the show tonight. So if your friends that you bought a ticket for could not make it, please save the date for them, June 26th. June 26th, Monday, June 26th at 7 p.m. Thank you. So happy to see all your beautiful faces. Thanks for joining us tonight, and I will turn it over to Emily, our artistic director.
One of the fun things about Soul is that we're an open door, and so people are welcome to join. So if you are inspired tonight, you want to become part of Soul, please do so. The next person who is going to come up is our newest member. She has brought dedication and energy. I have known her for a long, long time, and I want to celebrate the commitment that she has brought to storytelling and welcome her to the Soul stage. Y'all give it up for Keela Moore.
Thank you. This piece is called Out My Window. When I was a child, I spent a lot of time daydreaming. I grew up in a high-rise of Lake Michigan. So I'd look at Lake Michigan, and I'd daydream. Sometimes I'd fantasize about unicorns and other things children thought of. But I also dreamed about my birth father. You see, I never knew him growing up. He wasn't there when I was born. He wasn't there when I was growing up. And in preschool, in kindergarten, I would get questioned. Where's your dad? Why isn't he here at pickup? I never see him. Do you have a dad? And I didn't know what to say. When they asked, where is he? I didn't know. The only thing I knew was that he was from Nigeria. I knew his name. I didn't know if he lived there or if he was in Chicago. It's a city of 1 million people, so he could be here, and I just didn't know it. And I would also get questions from adults too, because my mom, she's white, and in the late 80s and early 90s, it was weird still to see a Caucasian woman with a biracial child. They would ask, "Is that your real mother?" Yes. Yes, she is. Well, what are you? Are you Mexican? Puerto Rican? What are you? I'm black and white. Are you sure you're black? Yes. It was very hard, and it was very strange. And so when I would go home, I would spend a lot of time looking out my window, and I'd imagine what it would be like if my birth father was in my life. Then I wouldn't have the questions. He'd show up to school. They'd see him. Oh, that makes sense. Mix white with black, you get brown. Okay, I get it. I also, was lonely at times. My single mom, no other kids, so I would dream, hey, maybe if I knew my birth father, he would have other kids, and then I could play with them. I didn't want younger siblings. I knew right away that they would steal my toys and break them. No. That could not be. And then when I had a bully in kindergarten, I realized an older brother, that's what I needed. And the older brother would meet that bully after school, and I'd never have a bully problem again. Yeah, so I would think about that older brother and what we could do together. He would take me on adventures when my mom was tired, and hang out with his friends, see movies, all these wonderful things, I thought. And then around the 3rd grade, I started talking to friends of mine, girlfriends who had older brothers, and they told me there were some downsides to the older brother thing. They said that they didn't really like hanging out with younger sisters, like I thought, and that older brothers would tell on you to their parents. So I thought, okay, maybe an older brother wouldn't be best. But I know what, an older sister, that would be ideal. They told me that older sisters and younger sisters, they just had a sister code, so you couldn't tattle on your sister. You kept their secrets. And more often than not, you could borrow their clothes or their shoes, so that was fun as well. I thought, okay, older sister, that would be ideal. And so I spent the next several years daydreaming out my window about an older sister. Older sister could take care of the bully problem. I knew that. And then, yeah, we could go on adventures too. We'd go on trips, go to the movies, laugh. It'd be wonderful. But then when I started high school, I realized that would never happen. I was now becoming an adult, so there was no chance my birth father would show up now. I didn't need him. Not that I ever really needed him. My mom was plenty dad enough. But it would have been nice. So I stopped thinking about him altogether. And then the summer before my senior year of high school, I was traveling with my mom visiting colleges. And on the way back, she told me that my birth father's sister had reached out. She wanted us all to meet. I was shocked. Why now? Was it because I'm about to turn 18? But what does he want to know? I'm fine. I've been fine. I thought this all in my head, and I didn't say anything for a long time, so my mom filled in the space. She said, if you have any questions, now's the time. It took this long to get a phone call. I don't know if we'll get another one. So I said, okay, I can't disagree with that logic, and I do have questions. And so the next day we headed to meet my birth father and my aunt. I tried on a million different outfits and finally settled on my favorite one, and I thought, oh, I look good. My hair is perfect. I'm ready. Got in the car, I started getting nervous, got to the elevator, and I realized, how did we get here so fast? I thought it would take forever to get to my aunt's building, but it was only 2.9 miles. We got upstairs, went to the door. I couldn't bring myself to knock, so my mom did. The woman opened the door. I looked at her, and I realized she looked familiar. She looked like me, but decades older. She welcomed us in. She gave me a hug. It was warm and strong. And then she gestured to the man behind her. He didn't look familiar at all. But he came up anyway, and she introduced him as my father. I said hello. He gave me a hug, one arm, then the other. Felt kind of awkward. And then he whispered, "I love you." I recoiled inside. I didn't say anything, but I thought, how can you possibly love me? We just met. We're strangers. How can you love someone that you've been absent from their whole life? The rest of the meeting, there wasn't much to say. I didn't feel like I could ask the questions that were, hard to ask at that time. I just got to know him a tiny bit and found out that I did have other siblings. I had younger ones, older one. It's like, wow, okay. And then I went home with my mom. That day I looked out the window and I thought, wow, it finally happened. I met him. And I wondered when we'd see each other again. The next day I thought the same thing, and the next. For weeks, and then finally my aunt called and said, let's have another meeting, let's go to dinner. So I went. Over the next year, I saw him a handful of times, and every time was awkward. But I tried anyway. And then my aunt said, how about meeting your older sister? I said, oh yes, I always wanted one of those. Sure, yeah. My younger siblings, I didn't get to really meet. My birth father never introduced us properly. I never got invited over to their house. But my older sister was an adult. So she arranged the meeting. I went again to her house, went upstairs, looked out the window at the lake, and I waited. Finally, my sister arrived, knocked on the door, came inside. I turned around, I looked at her. I did see familiarity in her eyes and her smile. She looked at me blankly. She had no idea who I was. And then my aunt pulled her aside and told her. I looked back at the lake, nervous, waiting, wondering what her reaction would be. She came up to me pretty quickly, and she said, I've always wanted a sister, and she hugged me firmly. And I thought, wow, I did too. We talked for hours, and I was so amazed about the similarities. Our career paths, what we liked, the things we like to do, like going out dancing. We even had the same shoe size. And then it was over. It was time to go home. It was late. We hugged and said we'd keep in touch. Got in the car with my mom. On the ride home, I got a text saying, it was great meeting you. I hope you get home safe. It's from my sister. I smiled. And I thought, well, I didn't even get to get home to look out my window to wait, so this is different. And indeed it was. Over the past 20 years, we have worked on our relationship. We've grown so much. We've fought a million times, and through it all, we've laughed and cried and had so much joy. And all the things that I dreamed of when I was younger, we've done. We've gone on the trips. We've gone shopping. We fought over shoes at DSW. and it's been great. And I'm able to look out my window and not look out with longing of what could have been. And I'm able to look out with the possibilities of what will be, the things that I will be doing with my sister. Because I know that when we talk, we'll make our plans and we'll do them. And I won't have to wait at my window. Thank you.
She's back there with her sister. Yeah. I want to celebrate our next storyteller, who has brought so much love to the city of Chicago. She is a creative spirit, a loving spirit, a committed spirit, and she has told such beautiful stories about family, and we are thrilled to welcome to the stage Lauren Woods.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Lauren Woods. Hey, Avery. Avery has known me for a very long time, and I am blessed because of that. I am becoming more aware of what it means to age, to grow into a fuller, grown-er woman, to be much closer to 40 than I am to 30, to be too old to my cousins and still young to my aunties. I am about to enter what I have been told is the best part of growing up, the middle. And I am in the beginning of that middle. As a curious note taker, I have always watched how the women around me have grown into their fuller selves. What they've taught me by the courage of their own life, how they enter a room, what they say, what they don't say, how they say it. And when something is of note, I make sure to remember. I call these moments or these people pearls. And throughout my girlhood, my teenagehood, my awkward years, this new grown woman, I've been collecting and stringing these pearls together. These have been what I've studied. These have been the notes that I've studied since girlhood. And I've always imagined what it would be when they're fully strung, when I'm fully adorned. Would I be like Miss Arthur? Now, Miss Rehover Arthur was a friend of my grandmother's. To some, they know her as the Sunday school teacher. Others might know her from being on the couples club. They might have been schoolmates with her at Doolittle or Phillips High School or Wilson Junior College, or she may have managed them as the supervisor of faculty secretaries here at the University of Chicago in the Divinity School. But I knew her as one of my grandparents' dearest and oldest friends, as a woman who taught me how to express gratitude and appreciation for the people around you. Now, one of my earliest memories of Mrs. Arthur was actually on her birthday. She had come to visit my grandparents with a gift in hand, and she was coming to give that gift to my grandmother. And I was really curious about this, because at 7 years old, I understood that things were the other way around. So I asked Mrs. Arthur, and I looked up, and I said, well, why did you come to give them gifts? And she looked down at me, and she smiled. And she explained to me that my grandparents were a gift to her, and how lucky she felt to have spent another year with them. And this was a ritual that she did every year. She would go around to her friends and give them gifts and tell them how lucky she felt to have spent another year with them. Now, my 7-year-old didn't understand the depth of this lesson, but I knew enough to take note, to put that pearl in my pocket, and to remember. Mrs. Arthur always acknowledged big and small accomplishments of mine. She would give a small note with a card, but every gift had a card, and in my family, the proper order was to open the cards, then to open the gifts. And every time she gave me a gift, I wrote her a thank you note. And every time I wrote her a thank you note, she wrote me a thank you note with another token, with a small token. And what I did not know then that I know now is how I learned the way she persevered through her thank you notes. Over the years, Mrs. Author's penmanship had changed. A surgical accident damaged the nerve in her right arm, so she had to teach herself how to write with her left hand. And her signature became less precise. It trembled across the note cards, but it was persistent. And Mrs. Author always, always signed her name. Aunt Lucille was another pearl. Now, Aunt Lucille was my aunt by relationship, not by blood, which is a very important distinction for this story. She was my grandparents' next door neighbor. She was the secretary of the block club. She always wore a house dress with gray pin curls. She was a tall, fair-skinned woman with really pronounced eyebrows. Her house was always hot, and it smelled more like the Virginia Slims she was trying to mask than the perfume she used to cover it. But Aunt Lucille taught me the power of mystery and boundaries. On occasion, when my grandparents weren't home, I would go there after school. If my grandparents weren't home, I would go to Aunt Lucille's house to wait for them on her couch. Now, there were specific instructions on how I would to arrive at Aunt Lucille's house. My first order was to go across the street to see if Mr. and Mrs. Alexander were home. And if they weren't home, then, and only then, was I to go to Aunt Lucille's house to knock on the door to wait for my grandparents. I'm not sure if Aunt Lucille actually liked me or she tolerated me, but she took responsibility for me. And she gave me a safe place to wait until my grandparents arrived. Now, I was clear anytime I sat in Aunt Lucille's couch that I was not to move. I don't ever remember her telling me not to move anywhere, but her posture made it clear that I was to sit quiet until my grandparents arrived. And sometimes I would ask to use the bathroom, and this was just a way for me to peek to see different parts in her house. Right? And one day, just off the bathroom, I noticed a table where she would watch Jeopardy and do her puzzles. Aunt Lucille was a puzzle enthusiast. She completed hundreds and probably in my mind thousands of puzzles. She had gotten so good that she would get bags of puzzles with no display picture, right? And she would just have to use the pieces and feel the pieces to see how they fit together. She spent hours assembling these puzzles. She was a woman who lived collage, and that would be a lesson that I learned years and years later. Now, the mother or the grandmother of all pearls was my mother's mother, Louise Bird. My grandmother was born in Dyersburg, Tennessee, September 28, 1926, to parents who sharecropped and picked cotton during the day. My grandmother's job was to make sure they had a hot meal when they returned. When she was in high school, she was the top of her home economics class. And the person who was at the top of the class had the distinction of cleaning the Hillman's house. And Miss Hillman was supposed to be the richest woman in Dyersburg. And as a teenager, after school, my grandmother would go and clean their home. Now, my grandmother, when she was telling me these stories, hinted at what she experienced while she was cleaning the homes. There was one time she was cleaning the homes and Mrs. Hillman's son had come back, she said, on furlough. And as she was cleaning the bathroom, he laid across the bed and unbuttoned his pants and began to give her compliments as she was cleaning. And my grandmother didn't go into the details of this story, but it was enough for me to know why she was so persistent when moving from Dyersburg to Tennessee to never clean another white woman's home. And that was a promise that she made to herself, and that was a promise that she kept when she left Dyersburg and came to Chicago. Her first job when she moved on 36th and Prairie, she knew the exact address, was working in the office of a furrier. And she had saved so much money that summer that she was able to buy a small fur shawl for herself and her sister. And that to her was the promise that she made to never have to clean another white woman's home. I learned a lot from my grandmother and picked up a lot of pearls along the way. Some of my favorite times of collecting pearls was when she would allow me to go with her on shopping trips. She loved to shop. She loved to grocery shop. She loved thrift shopping. She loved department stores. Her favorite was Macy's. But most of our memories were at the JCPenney. There's a lot that you can learn about keeping receipts, about checking receipts, about making sure you have every receipt and never in a card. And I remember one time she allowed me to go with her to the JCPenney. And we were returning some shoes that she had bought for me that were a little too tight for my feet. And the cashier kept asking her, "Are you sure you haven't worn these shoes?" And increasingly, my grandmother, of course she's a polite woman, she said no. The lady took out the shoes and examined them. "Are you sure you haven't worn these shoes?" My grandmother at this point had said no. And they were going back and forth, and I wasn't embarrassed, but I definitely felt awkward because there wasn't a crowd, but in my mind, everybody heard us. And I remember tapping onto my grandmother and saying, "Grandmommy, she's pregnant." And she looked at me and she said, "I didn't get her pregnant." I can interrupt any woman while she is making sure that she will always be treated with dignity and respect. The greatest pearls and all the pearls I collected were in the last 10 years of my grandmother's life. She had spent all of her life being accompanied to someone else. She left her mother's home and went into her husband's home and raised children. And then all of a sudden, she was left to be by herself. And I think about that time of aloneness and stillness as I'm growing into this womanhood that I'm getting used to. Because she taught me how to sit with yourself. And she taught me how to sit in silence. She taught me how to sit in discomfort. She taught me how to forgive things that happened years ago. She taught me that it was possible to change, even if you had become so accustomed to doing things one way. And so I say this, we are all pearls in this room. All of us giving and receiving parts of ourselves. So much of who you see now are just a collection of all the women that I got to sit and study, who were kind enough to pass a pearl, kind enough to take one off of their own string so that I can wear it. Thank you.
So when we are having workshop, I make what I call a story box. And inside the story box, there are different prompts every week so that everyone hopefully will be inspired. And one of the prompts that I remember that made me think about Lauren's story is, it's so clear that you have to cherish everyone. I think that's what I get from these older Black women, that every soul is to be cherished and that every flower is to bloom. Our next storyteller has been the person who said there should be a soul collective. And we celebrate the commitment that she has given to supporting women throughout Chicago in the variety of ways that she works, the kind of leader that she is, and now we get to hear the kind of stories that she tells. Please welcome Shelly Davis.
So, have you ever just needed a day off? Have you ever just wanted a day off? Right? And I don't mean just any kind of day off. Like, I don't mean a day off from work. I mean, that's nice. I don't mean a day off from family. That can be good too. But what I really mean is a day off from being the Black ambassador, the Black friend, the Black tour guide, that kind of day off. Well, I had planned that day off for me and 12 other women of color. See, we were going to Washington, D.C., to Howard University to celebrate one of us who was getting this really big, fancy award. And we had been planning this trip for months. I mean, we had a shared Google Doc. I knew where everybody was staying. I knew when people were flying in. I knew when people were flying out. I knew what we were going to eat. I knew it all, right? And a couple of weeks before our trip, I started getting emails not from one of our 12, but from Mary. And Mary's nice, white ally, really lovely. Turns out she was invited to see the award too. And she had a lot of questions. Where are you staying? What events have you signed up for? What are you wearing? And I answered those questions. I did. Except for the one about our dinner plans. I didn't skip that one. So I get to the airport. And I'm sitting here on the phone, talking to my friend. I just love having Avery. You gotta come to every show. And I'm talking on the phone to my family. And I'm sitting at my gate and I'm watching the people. And I see Mary walking down the hallway. And I was like, oh, I guess we're not on the same flight. I turn and grab something out of my bag. I sit up. There she is sitting right there. So I finish my call. I turn to Mary. We're talking. And she's so excited. And I'm excited too. And she says, so who else is coming? So I take out my phone. I mean, I was trying to be transparent, but I was also trying to hold my boundaries, right? So I just read the list. XYZ is coming, Y, Z, blah, blah. We get on the flight. We sit separately. I'm in the front of the plane. The doors open. I rush out. I'm trying to get my luggage, right? Because I need my stuff. I need my stuff. I forgot all about Mary. I really did. I got to my hotel, settled in, and my phone rang. It was Jill. Now, Jill is part of our group, right? She said that Mary called. And Mary wanted to know what the dinner plans were. And Jill was like, what should I do? And I said, you know what? I just wanted tonight just to be about us. She can come with us tomorrow to all the public events, blah, blah, but tonight, let's just have our time. She said, say no more. I got it. I'll call her back. I'm on it. We get to dinner. All 12 of us, we are hugging, we are laughing. We go outside, we take pictures before the sun goes down. We ask the staff a million questions. We order our cocktails. We sit back and we wait for our food to come. Turns out, there were 3 other people that got a call from Mary. Persistence, right? And the thing is that if I had been less grown, like my pre-50 less grown, I probably would have given in, right? Like either through the emails or the time at the airport or something. But me, like, you know, grown past 50, I just don't want to do it. And even though all 5 of us that had gotten a call from Mary hadn't really talked to each other, we all felt the same way. So not only did I feel supported and embraced by the group, I felt held, right? Like I felt known and seen and loved, and we had a good time. And the rest of the weekend we had a good time too. Mary came with us, she danced with us. It's fine, it's all good. We had a great trip. The following week, after I got home, back to my usual life, I went to a dinner party. Now this is a dinner party held by someone that's kind of local, kind of famous, kind of rich. You could see their family name on buildings. And I didn't really know why I was invited, but I'm kind of used to going to these things because I diversify the room. There are lots of people. It's just part of the job. It's not what I love, but I'm used to it. So I'm standing there in the entryway, holding my beautiful crystal glass and my fancy cocktail, and I'm looking at the imported light fixtures and the original art. And the host, who I actually didn't know, comes up to me and she says, "I have to talk to you." She whips me over to the side and she says, I just want you to know that it's not lost on me that you're the only black person here. I mean, we had the same dinner party yesterday, and we had three African Americans. I mean, I have done the DEI work. I mean, I know better. It's a true story. Like, this is my life. All right. So anyway, I look at her and I do what? Smile and nod. Smile. Let her get it all out of her system. And when she's done, I reach over and I just pat her on the elbow. I say, it's okay. I'm used to it. And I walked away and I finished my cocktail and I thought back to last week and I was like, I'm just glad I had that day off. Thank you.
You all can see that mining these stories in the seasons of our life was rich, right? All right, well, we have come to the moment of the last story of the evening. And before we go into it, I want to do one of the quotes that was in the story box about seasons. Seasons are like life. Some seasons are better than others. Some have more sun and rainbows. Others have storms and tornadoes. Some have both. You have to accept that and bring color and light to the season you're in as best you can. And always look forward to the next season. So we look forward to the next season of having you all with us. We want to thank each and every one of you for having been here. We want to thank all of the storytellers who have done the work to search inside of themselves to have stories to tell. And we want to bring forward our last storyteller, who is a wordsmith and whose energy has brought so much joy, and who is the person who always looks beneath the smile on your face to say, are you okay? And I so appreciate that. I want to bring up Terry Johnson.
So, a couple weeks ago, one of my good girlfriends, Vanessa, sends me an Instagram post. And it is a woman, Reshma Sujali, who is the woman who's the founder of Girls Who Code, and she's an attorney, all-around badass, one of the first Indian American women who's ever run for Congress. And she's telling a story about how she's been invited to yet another Master of the Universe convening, and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett are going to be in the front row. She's been given 10 minutes, and she's in the back trying to get herself together, and she's thinking, I really wish I had 12 minutes. If I had 2 more minutes, I could finish what I have to say. I don't know what she did, but I really hope she took those 2 extra minutes, because how many times have we sat in a room where a man took 5 extra minutes, too much time, too much space, and said absolutely nothing? But I digress. She goes on to talk about how there's all this pressure, and everybody keeps telling her, you know, you should be, are you okay? Are you okay? Because this is a really intimidating spot. She says she's thinking to herself, you know, I have been in a lot of rooms, lots of leaders, lots of CEOs, lots of presidents, prime ministers. And often she thinks to herself when she meets these presumably men, you run what? Because me and my girls would run circles around you. And then she reminds us that at the end of the day, it is not that women aren't prepared for the gig. It is not that women aren't intelligent enough. It is not that women can't be leaders. It is the unearned privilege of men that we need to unpack if we're going to understand this dynamic. And so she says, you know what, let's stop reading the books. Let's stop looking at the podcasts. Let's stop listening to TED Talks. It's all propaganda. It's all BS. Let it go. And while we're talking about unearned privilege of men, let's also talk about the unearned privilege of white folk. Because sometimes, and I'm a woman who does this for a living, Sometimes I get a little confused about what we're talking about here, right? So the conversation that we often have about women divides it up, women and people of color. And for those of us who are both, who are you talking about? But I digress again. So, Vanessa sends me this text, and at the bottom of it, it says, "'Cause me and my girls." And I get to thinking about my girls, a lot of my girls. The first set of girls that are your family, and the girls that are girls because your moms are girls, and then school girls and church girls and campfire girls. You all have heard me talk about my elementary school gang. Those are the people that I sang Lady Marmalade with in the basement. Those are the people who we fought about which Jackson brother we gonna marry. I didn't tell you we used to do dances in the basement. Maybe that's another story. They tried to teach me double dutch. A disaster. I gave up before they did. We went through puberty together. I am so glad you only have to do that one time. Then that circle got bigger because I went to high school. And that's where I learned how to be a proud nerd. And I was surrounded by artists. And these artists have been creating all their lives. Many of them are professional artists. And Yvonne, who actually straddles a couple of those circles, heard me say one time, "I think I really want to write." She bought me a writing class for my birthday. She opened up and continues to open up writing spaces for me. She asked me, "What are you writing?" She believed me when I said I wanted to do it, and she helped me do it. And then I go to college. And I participate in a couple of social experiments. The first one being, how can 3 women who are completely different live together peacefully? And then the second one is I pledged Delta. And I pledged Delta with 11 other women. And I learned a lot in that experience, but the thing I carry with me most is there is absolutely no way you can get 12 people to agree on anything. And so we should probably stop. But what we can do is create a space where all 12 women can be heard, can be seen, and participate in the decision making. So I go to work, and I find out that, your girls don't have to be the same age as you. So Haroldine, Bernadine, and Pat adopt me, and they help me make that transition. They used to call me Junior Flip. They help me make that transition in it, but then they also help me make the transition out of it. They said to me, "It's time for you to go. You can't grow much more here." So they helped me leave the nest. I get in other workspaces, more girls who are much like family. I have the Soul Collective girls, and then I have the Mature Hot women. Now, I say this all the time. I know you may think you know what hot means. Hot is actually health conscious, optimistic, and triumphant. No shade if you thought we were pole dancing. And in fact, thank you. Because if you think I'm that athletic, thank you. Last summer, I got to dance again for the first time since the pandemic, and it was really hard. It was the first time I was actually dancing injured. The only reason I got through it was because of those women. So now, I've given you a list of a lot of women, but I also want to tell you that I heard a lot of other things about women when I was growing up. Women are malicious. Women are dishonest. Women are always competing with you. Got to watch your back when you're around women. Women are passive aggressive. Now, I want to tell you that I didn't swallow all that, and I didn't internalize that, but that would not be completely true. I, of course, have male friends, many male friends. I think I'm the kind of person who needs male, female, light, dark, yin, yang. But I was one of those obnoxious women at one point in my life where I would say, I just prefer the company of men. I don't think that's actually true. I think I was performing that nonsense. I absolutely do have really great friends who are male. Some of them are in the room tonight. But it is something very different when you are standing in front of your girls. And your girls are looking you in the eye and they see you. They see all of you. And they don't flinch. So as I begin to close tonight, I want to finish the Vanessa story. I've developed a habit during the pandemic where I reach out to my friends with a simple text, "How you be?" She's been going through a lot. It's been a really rough time for her family. So she texts me back and she says, "I'm tired." And everything about that resonated in me, because I too am tired. It's been a very rough year. It's been a breakdown year. It's been a breakdown physical, it's been a breakdown mentally, breakdown emotionally. And so I said to her, "You know, I got a problem, Vanessa. I got a show on June 5th, and I have written nothing. I don't like it. I don't know if it's because I'm in this dark place, this weird place. Everything I write sucks. You gotta help me role play this, because I'm gonna have to tell Emily I can't do the show." And she said, "You know, the muses will come. Tonight we rest." Next morning, she sent me that Instagram post. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I knew who I wanted to talk about. The words flow, the tears flow. I was there. So I'm going to try something now. I need you to bear with me because this is going to be a struggle. I'm going to try to thank Vanessa. That's the easy part because she's not in the room. I want to thank Vanessa for being my girl and for being my muse in that moment. And now I'm going to try to thank the rest of my girls. And I can't possibly name names, because I'd mess up, I'd miss somebody. And they're in the room, so if I say it, I'm going to cry. And I can't possibly list all of the things that they have done to show up for me. So this is what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to say thank you for being in my life. And thank you for all of the ways that you've shown up for me. But most importantly, thank you for seeing me, all of me, in my messy imperfections, and not flinching. Your love, your support, your acceptance has meant the world. Thank you. Task for the evening, and yeah, Kathy's crying. I don't want to look at it. So again, thank you for being here with us tonight. Thank you to the Logan Center staff. Thank you for Elizabeth Miles, who's our ever-present film. There are ushers in the room, I hope. Onan Lasana, Alansana, I always do that wrong. Sage and Naima McRoberts. Thank you. Good news back. I think we need to give it up for Willow one last time. And always, Emily. Who, outside of being phenomenally talented, is also the most patient human I know. And when she tells you she helps us pull out our stories and tell our stories, she is not playing. So we hope that you will join us either at the next show or on Instagram or on Facebook. The next show, as Shirley said, is 7 o'clock on June 26th. We will absolutely tell you when it is and send you the information. Please support us in any way you feel necessary, and thank you for coming. You've been an amazing audience, so we'll see you next time.